My daughter called me at 2:30 in the morning, whispering, "Had, please come get me." When I arrived at her in-laws' house, her mother-in-law blocked the door and said she is not leaving. I forced my way in. When I saw my daughter unconscious with injuries on her arms, my blood started to boil. I am Lucas Harrington, 70 years old, and I have spent my entire life building skyscrapers that scrape the clouds above Chicago. I know how to pour concrete so it lasts 100 years, and I know how to spot a crack in a foundation before the whole building comes down. But the biggest crack I ever missed was the family my daughter Emily married into. Before I tell you what I did with the bolt cutters from my truck, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments what city you are watching from. I want to know who is standing with me today. The digital clock on my nightstand read 2:28 in the morning when the phone rang. It was not a normal ring. In the dead silence of an old man's house, that sound was like a fire alarm. I fumbled for my glasses and saw Emily's name on the screen. My heart hammered against my ribs because Emily never called this late. She knew I went to bed at 9 sharp. I slid the answer button and brought the phone to my ear, expecting to hear her crying, or maybe an apology for waking me up. Instead, I heard a sound that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was a ragged, wet breathing, like someone trying to suck air through a straw. Then came her voice. It was so faint, I had to press the phone hard against my head. "Dad, they are hurting me. The needle. Please come." Then the line went dead. I did not call back. I did not sit there wondering if it was a nightmare. I moved with a speed I did not know my 70-year-old body still possessed. I threw off the quilt and grabbed the pair of jeans I had left on the chair. I did not bother with socks. I shoved my feet into my work boots and grabbed my keys. As I ran through the kitchen, I did not grab a weapon. I grabbed my tool bag from the hallway closet. It was instinct. I am a builder. I fix things. And right now my daughter was broken. I jumped into my beat-up Ford F-150. The engine roared to life, a sound that usually comforted me, but tonight it sounded too slow. I backed out of the driveway, tearing up a patch of grass, and slammed the gear into drive. The drive to the Voss estate usually took 30 minutes. I made it in 15. The streets of Chicago were empty skeletons of steel and concrete flashing by my window. I ran 3 red lights. I did not care. All I could hear was that whisper. The needle. What did she mean by the needle? Emily was a kindergarten teacher. She was the softest soul I knew. She terrified of shots at the doctor. The idea of her near a needle made no sense unless someone was forcing it on her. I pulled up to the Voss mansion. It was a monstrosity of modern architecture, all glass and sharp angles, sitting behind a wrought iron gate. It looked like a fortress designed to keep people out, or maybe keep secrets in. I did not wait for the gate to open. I drove my truck onto the sidewalk, crushing their manicured hedges, and pulled right up to the front porch. The headlights of my truck flooded the front entrance with blinding white light. And there she was. Beatrice Voss. My daughter's mother-in-law stood behind the massive glass front doors. She was wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my truck and holding a glass of red wine. She looked like she was waiting for a delivery, not her daughter-in-law's father. She did not look scared. She looked annoyed. I jumped out of the truck, leaving the door open and the engine running. I stormed up the steps, my heavy boots thudding against the marble. Beatrice just stood there on the other side of the glass, sipping her wine. She locked eyes with me and smirked. I reached for the handle. Locked. Of course it was locked. "Open the door." "Beatrice," I growled. My voice was low and rough from the drive. I could see her mouth move. She did not yell. She enunciated every word clearly so I could read her lips. "Go home, Lucas. She is sleeping." I slammed my fist against the glass. It was reinforced, hurricane-proof glass. It did not even vibrate. I screamed at her. She called me Beatrice. She said you are hurting her. Open this damn door or I will bring it down." Beatrice let out a dramatic sigh. She stepped closer to the glass and spoke louder so her voice was muffled but audible. "She is having an episode, Lucas. We called the family doctor. She is delusional. If you come in here, you will only make it worse. Now get off my property before I call the police for trespassing." An episode. That was their favorite word. For the last 3 months, every time I wanted to see Emily, they said she was having an episode. She was tired. She was moody. She was adjusting to the medication. I had bought their lies because I wanted to respect my daughter's marriage. But tonight, the lie ended. I looked at Beatrice. I looked at the smug satisfaction on her face. She thought she had won. She thought a locked door and a property deed were enough to stop a father. She forgot who I was. I built half the foundations in this city. I know that everything can be broken if you apply enough pressure to the right spot. I did not say another word. I turned my back on her. I could feel her watching me, probably laughing, thinking I was walking away in defeat. I walked back to my truck. I reached into the bed of the pickup and pulled out my bolt cutters. They were 36 inches of solid steel, heavy and cold in my hands. They were designed to cut through hardened padlocks and thick chains. I turned back toward the house. The smile dropped from Beatrice's face. She dropped her wineglass. It shattered on the floor inside, spilling red liquid that looked too much like blood. She started mouthing the word, "No." She pointed a manicured finger at me, mouthing, "I will sue you." I walked up the steps. I did not run. I walked with the rhythm of a man going to work. When I got to the door, I did not aim for the lock. I swung the heavy steel handles back like a baseball bat, and I aimed for the center of the glass panel. The sound was like a gunshot. The safety glass did not just break, it exploded. Thousands of tiny cubes of glass rained down onto the marble foyer. The alarm system started screaming a piercing wail that echoed through the neighborhood. Beatrice screamed and scrambled back, slipping on the wine and the glass. I kicked the remaining shards out of the frame and stepped inside. The glass crunched under my work boots. It was the most satisfying sound I had heard in years. "Where is she?" I barked. Beatrice was on the floor, clutching her robe tight around her neck. Her face was pale. "You are crazy," she shrieked. "You are a maniac! Security, Derek! Call the police!" I did not wait for her answer. I knew where Emily's room was. It was on the second floor, the master suite that she shared with that spineless husband of hers. I took the stairs 2 at a time, ignoring the pain in my bad knee. My adrenaline was pumping so hard my vision was tunneling. I needed to see her. I needed to know she was alive. I reached the top of the landing and turned toward the master bedroom. The door was closed. I was 5 steps away when the door flew open. It was Derek, my son-in-law. He looked like a mess. His hair was disheveled and he was sweating profusely. He was wearing just his pajama bottoms. He saw me and his eyes went wide. He threw his arms out, blocking the doorway. "Dad, stop! You cannot go in there! Move, Derek!" I warned him. My hands were still gripping the bolt cutters. I was not threatening him with them, but I was not putting them down either. He held his ground, shaking his head frantically. "No, listen to me. She has lost her mind. She has a knife, Dad. She is dangerous. If you go in there, she might stab you. She thinks everyone is trying to kill her." I stopped. The hallway was silent except for the distant wailing of the house alarm. I looked at Derek, I looked at his shaking hands, I looked at the sweat on his upper lip, and then I looked past him into the shadows of the bedroom. I did not see a woman with a knife. I saw a stillness that scared me more than any weapon. I tightened my grip on the steel handles. "If she has a knife, Derek, why aren't you bleeding?" I did not wait for an answer to my question. Derek stammered, trying to find a lie that would fit the situation, but I was done listening. I dropped my shoulder and rammed into him with the force of a wrecking ball. He flew backward, crashing into a hallway table, sending a vase shattering to the floor. I did not even look at him. I raised my boot and kicked the bedroom door right next to the handle. The wood splintered with a dry crack, and the door swung inward, revealing the nightmare they had been hiding. The air inside the room was thick and stale, smelling of rubbing alcohol and something metallic that tasted like copper. It was not the smell of a bedroom where a young couple slept. It smelled like a hospital ward where people go to die. I stepped inside and my heart stopped beating for a full second. There was no woman running around with a knife. There was no rampage. There was only my little girl Emily tied to the bed like an animal. She was strapped down with thick leather restraints, the kind they use in high-security psychiatric wards. Her wrists were bound to the headboard so tightly that her skin had turned purple around the edges. Her ankles were secured to the footboard. She was not moving. Her head was lolled to the side, and a thin line of white foam was trickling from the corner of her mouth down to her chin. Her eyes were open, but they were rolled back into her head, showing only the whites. I dropped the bolt cutters. They hit the carpet with a heavy thud. I rushed to her side, falling to my knees. "Emily. Baby. Daddy is here." I reached out to cup her face. Her skin was cold, clammy, and slick with sweat. I looked at her arms. The sleeves of her nightgown were pushed up, and what I saw made me want to burn this entire house to the ground. Her inner arms were a roadmap of agony. They were covered in fresh needle marks, some still oozing tiny drops of blood, others turning into dark, ugly bruises. Derek scrambled to the doorway behind me, panting and clutching his side where I had hit him. He saw me looking at the needle marks and immediately started his performance. "It is heroin!" he screamed, his voice cracking with panic. "She has been doing it for months, Dad." We tried to stop her. "She gets violent when she is high. We had to tie her up so she would not hurt herself. Look at her. She did this to herself." I did not turn around. I placed 2 fingers against Emily's neck, searching for a pulse. It was there, but it was terrifyingly faint. It was a flutter, not a beat, like a bird trapped in a cage and running out of air. "She is overdosing, Derek." I roared, not taking my eyes off her face. "Call an ambulance now. I am not calling anyone until she calms down." Derek yelled, stepping into the room. "If we call 911, they will arrest her for possession. We are protecting her reputation. We are handling this. I looked at the foam on her lips. I looked at the restraints. This was not handling. This was an execution. I reached for the buckle on the leather strap binding her left wrist. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so pure it felt like lava in my veins. The leather was thick and stiff. I struggled with the prong, trying to free her. Suddenly a hand grabbed my shoulder and yanked me back. It was Derek. "Leave her alone," he shouted. "You do not know what you are doing. She needs to ride it out." That was the last mistake Derek made that night. I did not just push him away this time. I stood up and turned with the momentum of 70 years of hard labor behind me. I clenched my right hand into a fist, the knuckles scarred from decades of laying bricks and pouring concrete. I drove that fist straight into the center of his face. There was a sickening crunch of cartilage collapsing under bone. It was a sound I had heard on construction sites when timber snaps under too much weight. Derek did not scream immediately. He just dropped. He crumpled to the floor, clutching his face, blood exploding from his nose and streaming through his fingers. He curled into a ball, making a high-pitched whining sound. I stood over him, breathing hard. "You touch me again, and I will put you in the ground." I turned back to the door and saw Beatrice standing there. She was not checking on her son. She was not checking on her daughter-in-law. She was holding her phone up, filming me. Her face was a mask of cold calculation. "I have it all on video, Lucas," she said, her voice steady and venomous. "Breaking and entering. Assault with a deadly weapon. And now battery. You are going to die in prison." She raised the phone to her ear. I could hear the operator on the other line. Yes. Please hurry. He is insane. He has a weapon. He just beat my son unconscious. I am afraid for my life. He is trying to kill us. She was not calling for an ambulance for Emily. She was calling for the police for me. She was setting the stage, framing the narrative before the curtain even went up. I did not waste my breath on her. I turned back to Emily. Every second Beatrice spent lying was a second my daughter was slipping away. I went back to the restraints. My fingers worked faster now, fueled by desperation. I got the left wrist free, then the right. Her arms fell limply to her sides. She did not react. She was dead weight, Emily. I whispered, patting her cheek. Emily, wake up. Open your eyes. Nothing. Just that ragged, shallow breathing. I scooped my arms under her, lifting her up. She was so light. Too light. I remembered carrying her like this when she was 5 years old, after she fell asleep in the car. She felt the same now, fragile and trusting. But back then, I was carrying her to a warm bed. Now I was carrying her out of a torture chamber. I stood up, holding her against my chest. Her head rested on my shoulder, the foam staining my flannel shirt. I turned to the door. I had to get her to my truck. I had to get her to a hospital that was not on the payroll of the Voss family. Beatrice was still in the doorway, blocking my path. Move, I said. She smiled. It was a small, victorious smile. You are not going anywhere, Lucas. Listen. And then I heard it. The wail of sirens growing louder and louder. They were close, too close. Beatrice must have hit the silent panic alarm when I first drove onto the lawn. Blue and red lights began to flash against the walls of the hallway, reflecting off the broken glass downstairs. Tires screeched on the driveway outside. Car doors slammed. Police. Come out with your hands up. The voice boomed from a megaphone outside. Beatrice stepped aside, gesturing to the hallway with a mock invite. Go ahead, Lucas. Walk out there. They are waiting for a violent intruder. Do you think they will ask questions first, or shoot first? I looked at Derek groaning on the floor in a pool of his own blood. I looked at the bolt cutters lying on the carpet. I looked at my unconscious daughter in my arms. It looked exactly like what Beatrice wanted it to look like. A kidnapping gone wrong. An assault. But I could not stay here. If I stayed, Emily died. I tightened my grip on my daughter. I walked past Beatrice, ignoring the triumph in her eyes. I walked into the hallway. Below me, the front door was kicked open. 3 officers in tactical gear swarmed into the foyer, stepping over the shattered glass. They looked up the stairs and saw me. Freeze. Drop the girl. Put your hands in the air. 3 service weapons were pointed directly at my chest. I stopped at the top of the stairs. I did not put her down. I could not. She is dying, I yelled, my voice echoing off the high ceilings. She needs a hospital. Drop the girl or we will fire. The lead officer shouted, his finger tightening on the trigger. I looked down at Emily's pale face. I looked down the barrel of the guns. I took a step forward. Do not shoot, I screamed. Please, she is my daughter. But behind me, Beatrice screamed louder. He has a gun. He is going to kill her. The officers tensed. The air in the house crackled with impending violence. I stood on the edge of the stairs, holding the only thing in the world that mattered to me, while the world prepared to pull the trigger. The standoff on the stairs did not end with bullets, but it ended with me in handcuffs. I surrendered not because I was afraid of dying, but because I was afraid that if I died, there would be no one left to fight for Emily. They dragged me out of the Voss mansion and shoved me into the back of a squad car while paramedics loaded my daughter onto a stretcher. I watched through the wire mesh of the police car window as Beatrice stood on the porch, wrapping a cashmere shawl around her shoulders, looking like a grieving victim instead of the architect of this nightmare. The emergency room at St. Jude's Hospital was a blinding white purgatory of fluorescent lights and the smell of antiseptic that failed to cover the scent of fear. They handcuffed my right wrist to the metal arm of a hard plastic chair in the waiting area. I was not treated like a worried father. I was treated like a criminal, a suspect, a threat. My flannel shirt was torn and stained with sweat. My work boots were covered in mud from the Voss's lawn. My knuckles were bruised and bloody from where I had connected with Derek's face. To the staff passing by, I looked exactly like what Beatrice said I was. A violent, unhinged old man. Beatrice arrived 20 minutes later. She did not come alone. She walked in flanked by Derek, who had a bandage taped across his broken nose, and a man in a sharp gray suit who I assumed was their family lawyer. But the worst part was not who she brought with her, it was who she walked toward. A doctor in a pristine white coat emerged from the double doors of the trauma unit. He did not look like an overworked ER doctor. He looked rested and expensive. He had silver hair and a watch that cost more than my house. Beatrice greeted him by name. Dr. Sterling. She reached out and took his hands, her face crumpling into a mask of theatrical worry. "Thank God you are here, Dr. Sterling," she said loud enough for the police officer standing guard over me to hear. "This has been the most traumatic night of our lives. Is she stable? Did the drugs cause permanent damage?" The officer next to me shifted his weight and glared at me. "See?" His eyes seemed to say. "Even the doctor knows she is a junkie." Dr. Sterling nodded gravely and patted Beatrice's hand. "We have her sedated, Beatrice. Her heart rate was erratic, but we managed to stabilize it. You were right to be concerned. The toxicity levels suggest high doses of opioids. It is a miracle she did not go into cardiac arrest before the ambulance arrived." I surged forward in my chair, the handcuffs biting into my wrist bone. "That is a lie." I shouted, my voice hoarse. "She is not on drugs. Test her blood properly. Test for poison. Sit down, Mr. Harrington." The police officer barked, pushing me back into the seat by my shoulder. Beatrice looked over at me with sad, pitying eyes. She reached into her designer bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. She handed it to the officer. "Officer, please," she said softly. "My son's father-in-law is in denial. We have tried to help him understand, but he refuses to accept reality. Here are Emily's records from her psychiatrist. She has been battling bipolar disorder and substance abuse for 2 years. We have documented incidents of self-harm. That is why we had to restrain her. It was for her own safety." The officer opened the folder. I could see papers with official-looking letterheads, charts, prescriptions, notes. It was a masterpiece of forgery. They had been planning this for months, building a paper trail to bury my daughter under a mountain of lies. "I do not believe this," I growled. "Let me see those papers. Emily has never touched a drug in her life. She is a teacher. She is a good girl." The officer snapped the folder shut and looked at me with disgust. "The paperwork looks pretty clear to me, sir. And judging by the fact that you just hospitalized her husband, I am inclined to believe the people who did not break into a house with bolt cutters tonight." Beatrice wiped a fake tear from her cheek. "We just want to get her help, officer. We have found a wonderful facility that specializes in severe cases like hers. We just want our Emily back." While they were talking, the double doors to the treatment area swung open. A nurse pushed a gurney into the hallway, preparing to move a patient. It was Emily. She looked worse than she had at the house. Her skin was the color of ash. Her breathing was shallow and rhythmic, controlled by machines. But she was awake, barely. Her eyelids fluttered and she turned her head slightly. Her eyes were unfocused, searching the ceiling. "Emily!" I yelled, pulling against the chain. "Emily, look at me! Dad is here!" She did not turn toward my voice. She could not. And then I saw it. A nurse walking alongside the gurney reached into the pocket of her scrubs. She did not pull out a chart or a thermometer. She pulled out a syringe. It was small, filled with a clear, viscous liquid. It did not look like saline. It looked thick like syrup. Beatrice and Dr. Sterling were busy distracting the police officer with their sob story. No one was looking at the gurney except me. The nurse glanced around quickly, checking the hallway. Her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second. She did not look like a nurse doing her job. She looked like a thief caught in the act. She looked terrified. She quickly uncapped the needle and injected the liquid directly into Emily's IV port. She did not check a chart. She did not sanitize the port. She just pushed the plunger down in one fast motion and hid the empty syringe back in her pocket. "Stop!" I screamed. "What did you give her?" "Officer, look. She just injected her with something." The officer spun around, hand on his holster. "What is going on?" Dr. Sterling stepped in smoothly, blocking the officer's view of the nurse. "It is just a sedative, officer. Standard protocol for transport." She was becoming agitated. "We need to keep her calm to prevent another seizure." He lied. I saw Emily's reaction. It was not a sedative. Her body went rigid on the gurney. Her back arched slightly, and her fingers curled into claws. Her mouth opened in a silent gasp of pain. Then she went completely limp. It was unnatural. It looked like her entire system had just been shut down by a switch. That was not a sedative. I yelled, struggling so hard the metal chair legs screeched across the floor. "You are killing her!" "That is enough," the officer snapped. He walked over and got in my face. "You are causing a disturbance in a hospital. One more word, and I will drag you to a cell right now." Beatrice walked up behind the officer. She looked at me with cold, dead eyes. "Officer, I think it would be best if Mr. Harrington was removed from the premises. He is clearly unstable. We have a restraining order pending, but given his violent behavior tonight, surely you can keep him away from the patient." The officer nodded. "I am issuing an emergency protective order, Mr. Harrington. You are to stay 500 feet away from your daughter and the Voss family. If you violate it, you go straight to jail. Do you understand?" I slumped back in the chair. My wrist was bleeding where the metal had cut the skin. I realized then that screaming would not save her. Violence would not save her. They owned the narrative. They owned the doctor. They owned the law. I looked at Emily as they began to wheel her down the corridor away from me. I looked at the nurse who was refusing to make eye contact. I looked at Dr. Sterling, who was whispering something to Derek. I needed to be smart. I needed to be free to act. And I could not do that from a jail cell, I understand, I said quietly. My voice was calm. Terrifyingly calm. "Good," the officer said. He unlocked the handcuffs. "Get out of here. If I see you near this hospital again, you are done." I stood up, rubbing my wrist. I did not look at Beatrice. I did not want her to see the promise of retribution in my eyes. I turned to walk away, but Dr. Sterling's voice stopped me cold. "Nurse, prep the patient for immediate transport," Dr. Sterling said loud and clear. "Her husband has signed the release forms. We are moving her to the Serenity Hills private care facility immediately. The ambulance is waiting at the rear exit." I froze. Serenity Hills. I knew every hospital and clinic in the state from my years in construction. I had built wings for 3 of them. I had never heard of Serenity Hills. It was not a hospital. It was a hole. A place where they could hide her, where no one could hear her scream, and where a father could never find her. They were not treating her. They were disappearing her. I walked out of the sliding glass doors into the cold night air. I did not go to my truck. I went around the corner into the shadows and waited. I had 500 feet of law between me and my daughter, but I had a lifetime of rage fueling my legs. I was going to follow that ambulance, even if I had to run until my heart exploded. The holding cell smelled of stale urine and industrial bleach. It was a smell I knew well from working on job sites in the worst parts of Chicago. But tonight, it smelled like failure. I sat on the cold metal bench, my elbows on my knees, staring at the concrete floor. The adrenaline from the hospital was fading, and in its place a cold, hard realization was setting in. I had played right into their hands. Beatrice and Derek wanted me to lose my temper. They wanted me to look like a violent old man so they could get me out of the way, and I had given them exactly what they wanted. I looked at the scratches on my wrists from the handcuffs. I thought about Emily lying on that gurney, her body limp, her mind clouded by whatever poison that nurse had pushed into her veins. They had separated us. They had built a wall of legal paper and police officers between a father and his daughter. But walls are my business. I know how to build them, and I know how to tear them down. I used my one phone call to dial a number I had not used in 5 years. Harrison Thorne. He was not a family lawyer. He was a shark in a $3,000 suit. He was the kind of lawyer you called when you wanted to burn the other side to the ground. He answered on the second ring, even though it was 3 in the morning. Harrison. "It is Luke Harrington," I said. I did not have to explain who I was. Harrison never forgot a client, especially not one who had made him a partner in his firm by handling the construction litigation for the city's biggest skyline project. "Luke." His voice was crisp and alert. "Why are you calling me at this hour? I am in the precinct on 5th. Beatrice Voss and her son just had me arrested for assault. I need to get out. Now. I will be there in 20 minutes, he said. "Say nothing. Sign nothing." I hung up the phone and leaned back against the cinder block wall. The waiting was the hardest part. It gave me time to think. It gave me time to connect the dots that I had been too blind to see before. Why now? Why were they doing this to Emily now? Beatrice loved her reputation. Having a daughter-in-law in a mental institution was not good for her image as the perfect charity matriarch, unless the alternative was worse, or unless the reward was worth the scandal. Then it hit me. The trust fund. My late wife Sarah had set up a trust for Emily before she passed away. It was $5 million generated from Sarah's family investments and my construction business profits. Sarah was smart. She knew Emily was too kind, too trusting. She had locked the money away until Emily turned 35. She wanted Emily to be mature enough to handle that kind of wealth. Emily turned 35 in 3 months. If Emily was healthy and sane on her birthday, she would get full control of the $5 million. She could leave Derek. She could buy a new house. She could cut Beatrice off. But if Emily was declared mentally incompetent before her birthday, if she was committed to a long-term facility, if a court ruled she could not manage her own affairs, then the control of the trust would go to her next of kin. Her legal guardian, her husband. Derek. My blood ran cold. This was not about drugs. This was not about mental illness. This was a heist, a $5 million robbery in slow motion. They had spent the last year gaslighting her, making her look unstable, feeding her pills to make her sick, all so they could step in right before the deadline and seize the money. They were drowning in debt. I knew Beatrice had leveraged the mansion 3 times. I knew Derek was a failed day trader. They needed that money to survive, and they were willing to sacrifice my daughter's life to get it. I stood up and paced the small cell. 3 steps forward, turn. 3 steps back, turn. The rage was building again, but this time it was focused. It was cold. I was not going to punch Derek again. I was going to dismantle his entire life, brick by brick. The heavy steel door buzzed and slid open. An officer stepped in, looking less arrogant than the one at the hospital. "Your lawyer is here. You are being processed for release." Harrison Thorne was waiting for me in the lobby. He looked out of place in the dingy police station, standing tall in a charcoal suit, his silver hair perfectly combed. He held a briefcase in one hand and my personal effects bag in the other. "Luke," he said, nodding at me. He did not ask if I was okay. He knew I was not. We walked out of the station into the pre-dawn chill. The city was still dark. The streetlights hummed overhead, casting long shadows on the pavement. "What is the situation, Harrison?" I asked, taking the bag from him. "It is a mess, Luke," he said, walking toward his black sedan. "Beatrice has filed for an emergency restraining order. The judge granted it temporarily based on the hospital report and the police statement. You cannot go within 500 feet of Emily or the Voss family until the hearing next week." I stopped walking. "Next week?" "Harrison, they are killing her. They drugged her right in front of me. This is about the trust fund. Her birthday is in 90 days. They are trying to have her declared incompetent so Derek gets the money." Harrison stopped and looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "That explains the rush. If that is their play, they need her diagnosed and committed quickly." "Where is she?" I asked. "Dr. Sterling said they were moving her to a place called Serenity Hills." Harrison pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. "I checked on that while I was processing your bail. Serenity Hills is a private facility about 2 hours north. It is a lockdown unit, high security, very expensive and very discreet. It is where rich people hide their problems." "We need to go there," I said, moving toward his car. Harrison shook his head. "Luke, you cannot. If you show up there, you violate the order. They will throw you back in this cell, and this time no bail. You need to go home, shower, eat. Let me handle the legal side. We will petition for an independent medical evaluation." I ignored him. I ripped open the plastic bag holding my belongings, my wallet, my keys, and my phone. I turned my phone on. The screen lit up, showing a picture of Emily and me at her college graduation. She looked so happy then, so full of life. "I am not going home, Harrison, and I am not going to Serenity Hills." Harrison looked confused. "What are you talking about? You just said they are taking her there." I tapped the app icon on my phone. It was a simple tracking app, the kind parents use to keep tabs on their kids. Last year, for her 31st birthday, I gave Emily a necklace, a silver locket with a picture of her mother inside. Derek laughed at it. He called it cheap, sentimental junk, but I made it myself. And inside the lining behind the photo, I embedded a micro GPS chip. It has a battery life of 3 years. I told Emily never to take it off because it was her mother watching over her. I looked at Harrison. I never told her about the chip. I did not want her to think I was a controlling old man. I just had a bad feeling about Derek even back then. I wanted to know I could find her if I ever needed to. I opened the map. A small red dot pulsed on the screen. Harrison leaned in, looking over my shoulder. "The ambulance left the hospital 30 minutes ago," Harrison said. "They should be on the interstate heading north if they are going to Serenity Hills." I zoomed in on the map. The dot was not on the interstate. It was not heading north. It was moving east. Fast. "That is not the way to the clinic," Harrison said, his voice losing its professional calm. "That is the industrial district." I watched the red dot moving through the grid of streets I knew better than the back of my hand. It bypassed the highway on-ramp. It turned down a road that led away from the residential areas, away from the hospitals, away from civilization. It was heading toward the lake. "Why are they going to the lake, Luke?" Harrison asked. I did not answer. My stomach twisted into a knot. There was nothing out there at this hour. Just warehouses, shipping containers, and the dark freezing water of Lake Michigan. "They are not taking her to a clinic, Harrison," I said, my voice trembling with a new kind of fear. "They lied about the transfer." The red dot slowed down and then stopped. It hovered right on the edge of the blue expanse of the map. "They are at the docks," I said. "The docks, the shipping yards, At 4 in the morning, Harrison looked at me, and for the first time I saw fear in the shark's eyes. Luke, get in the car. I did not need to be told twice. I threw my bag into the back seat and jumped into the passenger side. Harrison floored the gas, and the luxury sedan roared to life, tearing down the empty street. I stared at the phone screen, praying for the dot to move back toward the road, praying that maybe the driver was just lost. But the dot stayed still, right on the edge of the water. They were not trying to cure her. They were trying to erase her. And I was 20 minutes away. Harrison drove me to the impound lot where my truck had been towed, and I have never moved faster in my life. I paid the release fee with shaking hands, and the moment I turned the key in the ignition of my old Ford F-150, I felt a surge of power that I had not felt in the lawyer's luxury sedan. This truck was 20 years old. It was made of heavy American steel, not plastic and fiberglass. It had scars and dents from decades of construction sites, just like me. Tonight, it was not a work truck. It was a weapon. I peeled out of the lot, ignoring the speed limit signs. The GPS dot on my phone was still moving east toward the industrial docks. I knew that route. There was nothing out there but shipping containers, rusting cranes, and deep cold water. If they got Emily onto a boat, or if they just planned to dump the vehicle, she would be gone forever. The thought made my foot press the gas pedal all the way to the floor. The engine roared a deep, guttural sound that vibrated through the steering wheel and into my bones. I caught sight of them 5 minutes later. The private ambulance was a white van with no markings other than a generic medical cross. It was speeding, weaving through the late-night traffic of the industrial district. I narrowed my eyes. That was not how an ambulance drove when it was transporting a patient. That was how a criminal drove when he was running from a crime scene. I pushed the truck harder. The distance between us closed. I could see the silhouette of the driver in the side mirror of the van. He was not wearing scrubs. He was wearing a dark hoodie, and he was smoking a cigarette. I saw him glance in his mirror and see my headlights. He did not slow down. He sped up. The chase was on. We tore past the warehouses, doing 80 miles an hour in a 40 zone. The van swerved violently, running a red light and nearly clipping a delivery truck. I stayed right on his bumper. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I had driven heavy machinery on ice and mud. I knew how to handle a vehicle at its limit. I pulled into the left lane, bringing my truck alongside the van. I looked over. The driver looked at me, and I saw the recognition in his eyes. He knew who I was. He yanked his steering wheel to the left, trying to sideswipe me, trying to run me off the road and into the concrete median. Metal screamed against metal. Sparks flew up past my window like fireworks. The impact shook my teeth, but I held the line. My truck was heavier. It was a tank. I forced him back into his lane, but he did not give up. He brake-checked me, trying to make me smash into his rear doors where Emily was. He was using my daughter as a shield. The docks were coming up fast. I could see the cranes looming against the night sky like giant metal skeletons. I knew the layout of this road. In 2 miles, it ended at the pier. If he reached the pier, he could drive right onto a waiting cargo ship, or worse, he could drive the van straight into the water to destroy the evidence. I looked at the rearview mirror. No police. No witnesses. Just me and the man trying to kill my child. I realized then what I had to do. I could not just stop him. I had to wreck him. But I had to do it in a way that would not kill Emily. I needed a controlled crash. I needed to create a scene so big and so violent that the state police would have to come. I needed to summon the cavalry by making a disaster. I took a breath. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles turned white. "I am sorry, baby girl," I whispered. "Hold on tight." I waited for a gap in the concrete median. I saw a stretch of open road ahead. I floored the gas, pushing the truck past its red line. I surged forward, inching past the van until my front bumper was even with his front wheel. I did not hesitate. I turned the wheel hard to the right. I used the pit maneuver, a move I had seen police use on television, but I put the weight of a 3-ton truck behind it. I slammed into his front fender. The impact was thunderous. The van lost traction immediately. It fishtailed wildly, tires smoking and screeching against the asphalt. The driver lost control. The van spun sideways, sliding across the road like a hockey puck. But I had not calculated the momentum correctly. My truck was tangled with his. When the van flipped onto its side, it took me with it. The world went upside down. There was the deafening sound of crunching metal and shattering glass. My windshield exploded inward. The roof of my cab caved in. I felt a sharp tearing pain in my head, and then the crushing weight of the seatbelt digging into my chest. My truck rolled once, twice, and then slammed into a concrete barrier, coming to a rest on its roof. Silence. For a moment there was only silence and the hissing of steam from the busted radiator. I hung upside down in the darkness. My vision was blurry. Something warm and wet was dripping into my eyes. Blood. I tasted copper in my mouth. My left arm was numb. I tried to move, and a bolt of agony shot through my ribs, making me gasp. I have to get up, I told myself. Get up, old man. She is still in there. I fumbled for the seatbelt release. My fingers were slippery with blood. I finally found the button and clicked it. I fell hard, hitting the roof of the cab, which was now the floor. I groaned, fighting the urge to pass out. I kicked at the passenger door. It was jammed. I kicked again, screaming with the effort, channeling every ounce of pain into force. The door groaned and popped open. I crawled out onto the asphalt. The cold air hit my face, stinging the open cut on my forehead. I wiped the blood from my eyes and looked around. The ambulance was 20 yards away, lying on its side. The engine was smoking. The driver's side was crushed against the pavement. The back doors were twisted but closed. Then I saw the fire. A small flicker of orange flame was licking at the undercarriage of the van near the fuel tank. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through my concussion. Emily! I screamed. I dragged myself toward the van. My legs felt like they were made of lead. I stumbled, fell, and got back up. I ran limping toward the burning vehicle. The driver of the van had managed to crawl out through the broken windshield. He was bleeding, holding his arm, looking dazed. He saw me coming. He saw the look in my eyes. He did not stay to fight. He turned and ran, disappearing into the darkness of the shipping yards. Coward. I reached the back doors of the ambulance. They were jammed shut. I grabbed the handles and pulled. Locked. I looked around for a tool, a rock, anything. I saw a piece of guardrail that had been torn off in the crash. I grabbed it, my muscles screaming in protest. I smashed the window of the back door. I reached in through the jagged glass and unlocked the latch. I threw the doors open. Emily was there. The gurney had overturned, but the straps had held her in place. She was hanging sideways, suspended in the darkness. She was still unconscious, limp as a rag doll. I climbed inside the overturned van. The heat was rising. I could smell the gasoline, now sharp and pungent. I fumbled with the straps. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. Come on, come on! The fire was growing. I could hear the crackle of flames eating through the metal. I got the last buckle open. Emily fell into my arms. She was dead weight. I wrapped my arms around her, shielding her head with my hand. I dragged her toward the open doors. I pulled her out onto the road. I did not stop. I hooked my arms under her shoulders and dragged her backward across the pavement, away from the burning van. 10 feet. 20 feet. Behind us, the gas tank ignited. Boom. The explosion knocked me flat. A wave of heat washed over us, singeing the hair on my arms. I curled my body around Emily, protecting her from the debris. I lay there on the cold asphalt, gasping for air, my cheek pressed against the ground. I looked at Emily. Her face was dirty, smudged with soot, but she was breathing. She was alive. Then I saw the lights. Not the red lights of the fire truck, but blue lights. Dozens of them. They were coming from the highway entrance. State troopers. The highway patrol. The neutral army I had prayed for. They swarmed the scene. Officers with flashlights running toward us. I tried to stand up to tell them who I was, to tell them about the poison, but my legs finally gave out. The world started to spin. The edges of my vision turned black. "Sir, stay down! We have medics coming!" a voice shouted from far away. I looked at my daughter one last time. I brushed a piece of glass from her hair. "I got you, baby," I whispered. "You are safe now." And then the darkness took me. The first thing I felt was the throbbing in my skull. It was a rhythmic drumbeat of pain that matched the frantic beeping of the monitor next to my bed. I tried to sit up, but a wave of nausea pushed me back down against the pillows. I blinked, trying to clear the fog from my vision. I was not in a jail cell, and I was not on the cold asphalt of the highway. I was in a hospital room. But it was not the pristine, silent private clinic Beatrice had tried to send us to. This was Cook County General. The walls were scuffed, the floors were worn, and the air smelled of floor wax and old coffee. It was the smell of a place where real people came to get saved, not hidden. "Luke, do not try to move yet. You have a severe concussion." The voice came from the chair in the corner. It was Harrison Thorne. My lawyer looked like he had been through a war zone. His expensive suit was rumpled, his tie was loose, and there was a smear of grease on his cheek, probably from helping drag me out of the wreckage. But his eyes were sharp. He was alert. "Where is she, Harrison?" I croaked. My throat felt like I had swallowed broken glass. "Where is Emily?" "She is in the ICU down the hall," Harrison said, standing up and pouring me a cup of water. "She is alive, Luke. You saved her." The state troopers took control of the scene. Because of the fire and the explosion, they bypassed the private ambulance protocol and brought everyone here. This is a state facility. Beatrice has no friends here, no payroll doctors, no board members to pull strings. I took the water, my hand shaking so bad water sloshed onto my hospital gown. I drank it in one gulp. "Is she safe?" "For now," Harrison said. "I went before a night court judge about an hour ago while you were unconscious. I showed him the GPS data. I showed him the photos of the crash site. I argued that the transport was an attempt to flee jurisdiction. The judge granted an emergency protective order valid for 24 hours. No one except medical staff and legal counsel is allowed in her room. Not Derek. Not Beatrice. Just us." I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. 24 hours. It was not a victory, but it was a lifeline. It gave us time to find the truth. "I need to see the doctor," I said, pushing the blanket off my legs. Harrison put a hand on my shoulder. "The attending physician is Dr. Aris. He is good. He is neutral. He is running a full toxicology screen now. Standard panel. Opioids, amphetamines, alcohol." "No," I said, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. The room spun violently, but I gripped the mattress until it stopped. Standard panel is not enough. They will find the opioids Beatrice has been feeding her, and they will stop looking. They will just call her an addict, and case closed. I looked down at my flannel shirt. The nurses had cut it open to check my chest, but it was still hanging off me. I grabbed the fabric near the shoulder. There on the dark plaid were strands of hair. Long brown strands. Emily's hair. When I carried her out of the van, her hair was falling out in clumps, Harrison. I said, my voice trembling. I brushed her head, and it just came away in my hand. She is 32 years old. She is not going through chemotherapy. Opioids do not make your hair fall out. Heroin does not make your nerves fire so much pain that you pass out. I remembered the look on her face in the bedroom, the way her fingers curled into claws. The way she screamed silently when the nurse injected her. It was not a high. It was agony. "Get the doctor," I commanded. "Now." 5 minutes later, Dr. Aris walked in. He was a young man with dark circles under his eyes, looking exhausted but intelligent. He held a clipboard. "Mr. Harrington, you should be resting. You have 3 broken ribs and a head injury." I ignored him. "Doctor, tell me about my daughter's hair." Dr. Aris paused. "We noticed the alopecia while we were cleaning her up. It is diffuse hair loss. Significant. We also noted Mace's lines on her fingernails, white bands running across the nail bed. And the neuropathy?" I asked. "The pain. She is responding to pain stimuli even in her comatose state. Her nerves are hypersensitive." I looked him in the eye. "It is heavy metal poisoning." Dr. Aris frowned, checking his chart. "We are running a standard heavy metal panel. Lead, mercury, arsenic. Test for thallium," I said. The doctor stopped writing. He looked up slowly. "Thallium. That is extremely rare. It has been banned for decades. It was used in rat poison and insecticides. Why would you suspect thallium?" "Because it is tasteless." I said, my mind racing back to the conversation I had overheard months ago at a dinner party Beatrice hosted. She was bragging about how she got rid of a rat infestation in the guest house using some old stuff her husband had stored in the basement from the 70s. She called it the inheritance powder because it was undetectable if you did not look for it. Because it causes hair loss. Because it causes nerve damage that looks like madness. "Test for thallium, doctor. Please." Dr. Aris looked at me for a long moment, measuring my sanity against my desperation. Then he nodded. "I will add it to the panel. We will know in an hour." The next hour was the longest of my life. I sat in a wheelchair outside Emily's room, staring through the glass. She looked so small in that bed, hooked up to machines that breathed for her. I wanted to go in and hold her hand, but I was afraid I would break her. Suddenly, the double doors at the end of the hallway burst open. The peace of the ward was shattered by a screeching voice I knew too well. "I demand to see my daughter-in-law. Get your hands off me. Do you know who I am?" Beatrice was storming down the corridor. She was still wearing her silk robe, but she had thrown a trench coat over it. Her hair was wild, her eyes manic. Behind her, Derek shuffled along looking like a beaten dog, his nose splinted and taped. Security guards were trying to block her, but she was slapping their hands away. "That is her," Beatrice screamed, pointing at Emily's room. "She is a danger to herself. You have no right to hold her. I am her legal guardian." I wheeled my chair into the middle of the hallway, blocking her path. "You are not her guardian yet, Beatrice," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "And you never will be." Beatrice stopped. She looked at me sitting in the wheelchair, battered and bloody, and she sneered. "You should be dead, old man. You wrecked a vehicle. You kidnapped a patient. I have lawyers drawing up the charges right now." Harrison stepped out from behind me. "And I have a court order, Beatrice. Step back or you will be arrested for contempt of court." Beatrice laughed, a high, brittle sound. "A court order based on the lies of a senile old man. My son is her husband. He has the right to make medical decisions. We are moving her to Serenity Hills, where she can get proper care, not this dump." Dr. Aris stepped out of the nurse's station. He held a printout in his hand. His face was pale. He looked from me to Beatrice, and his expression hardened. "Mrs. Voss," the doctor said, his voice cutting through the noise, "no one is moving this patient." Beatrice turned her fury on him. "Who are you?" "I want to speak to your superior." "I am the chief toxicologist on duty," Dr. Aris said, walking closer. "And I just received the results from the mass spectrometer." He held up the paper. "We found high concentrations of opioids, yes, but we also found something else. The patient has lethal levels of thallium in her blood." The hallway went silent. Even the beeping monitors seemed to pause. Thallium. Dr. Eris continued, his eyes locking onto Beatrice. It is a slow-acting poison. Based on the accumulation in her hair and nails, she has been ingesting it for at least 3 months. This was not an overdose. This was not a suicide attempt. This is attempted murder. I looked at Derek. His face went gray. He started to shake. Beatrice stood frozen. For a second, I saw the fear in her eyes. The mask slipped. She knew she was caught. The science did not lie. The rat poison she had been mixing into Emily's soup, the special vitamins she had insisted on administering herself. It was all right there on the paper. But Beatrice Voss was a survivor. She was a predator who knew how to chew her own leg off to escape a trap. She did not deny it. She did not confess. Instead, her face crumpled. She let out a sob that sounded almost genuine. She grabbed Derek's arm and wailed, "Oh my God, Derek, I told you. I told you she was sicker than we thought." She turned to the doctor, tears streaming down her face. "Doctor, you have to save her. My poor Emily. She has been so depressed. She told me last week that she wanted to end it all. She must have found the old rat poison in the garden shed. She poisoned herself." My jaw dropped. I stared at her in disbelief. She tried to commit suicide. Beatrice sobbed loud enough for the entire ward to hear. "She is so mentally unstable, she drank rat poison to kill herself. Oh, my poor sweet girl." She looked at me, and through the tears, her eyes were cold, hard stones. "See, Lucas," she said softly. "This proves she is insane. Who else but a crazy person would drink poison? She needs to be institutionalized for the rest of her life, for her own protection." I gripped the arms of my wheelchair until the metal bent. She had taken the truth and twisted it into a noose to hang around my daughter's neck. She was not going to go to jail. She was going to use the poison as the final nail in the coffin of Emily's sanity. While Beatrice was busy putting on the performance of a lifetime in the hospital hallway, screaming about her rights and weeping fake tears, I slipped away. I did not go back to my hospital bed. I went to the parking lot, where a black sedan was waiting with the engine running. Behind the wheel was Frank Miller, the private investigator Harrison had hired while I was unconscious. Frank was an ex-cop with eyes that missed nothing and a reputation for getting into places that were supposed to be impenetrable. We drove back to the Voss estate in silence. The sun was starting to rise, casting a gray light over the city, but inside the truck, my mind was pitch black. I sat clutching my side, every bump in the road, sending a fresh jolt of agony through my broken ribs. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the cold fury burning in my gut. I knew what poison was in my daughter's blood. Now I needed to find the bottle. I needed to find the reason. And I needed to find it before Beatrice could destroy the evidence. The mansion loomed ahead, dark and silent. The police tape from earlier that night fluttered in the wind across the broken front entrance, but the house itself looked abandoned. Beatrice was at the hospital. Derek was with her. The staff had likely been sent home to keep them from witnessing the drama. The house was empty, or at least it was supposed to be. We did not go through the front door this time. I knew this house. I had looked over the blueprints when Carlos and Vanessa bought it, even though they ignored my advice on the foundation. I knew there was a service entrance around the back near the garage used by the caterers and the cleaning crew. Frank picked the lock in 10 seconds. We slipped inside into the mudroom. The air in the house was still and cold. It smelled of expensive cleaning products and the lingering scent of that wine Beatrice had spilled. We moved quietly through the kitchen, avoiding the shattered glass that still littered the foyer. "We need to find Derek's office," I whispered. "Beatrice runs the show, but Derek handles the money. If there is a reason they need that trust fund so badly, it will be in his paperwork." We went up the back stairs, the ones the servants used. Derek's office was on the second floor, down the hall from the master bedroom where I had found Emily. The door was closed. I turned the handle. Locked. Of course. Frank stepped forward and used a tension wrench. Click. The door swung open. If the rest of the house was a showroom of perfection, Derek's office was a chaotic disaster. Papers were strewn everywhere. Files were piled on the floor. Takeout boxes covered the mahogany desk. It smelled of stale cigar smoke and fear. It was the room of a man who was losing control. Frank started on the filing cabinets. I went to the desk. I swept aside the empty coffee cups and started looking at the papers. It did not take long to find the truth. It was not hidden. It was right there on the surface, screaming for attention. Here, I said, holding up a stack of letters with red, bold print. They were foreclosure notices. Not just one. 3. The bank had started proceedings to seize the mansion 2 months ago. I kept digging. I opened the top drawer and found a leather ledger. Inside were handwritten notes, names, and numbers. They were not business contacts. They were bookies. Illegal sports betting sites. High-stakes poker debts. I did the math in my head, adding up the numbers in the margin. My hands started to shake. Derek was not just broke. He was underwater by nearly $2 million. Frank whistled from across the room. "Luke, look at this." He held up a letter from a loan shark firm in Las Vegas. It was dated a week ago. The language was polite, but the threat was clear. Payment in full required by the first of the month. Failure to settle will result in collection by alternative means. Beatrice had leveraged everything to pay for her socialite lifestyle, and Derek had gambled away the rest, trying to win it back. They were drowning. They were dead broke. And then I saw the calendar on the wall. Emily's 35th birthday was circled in thick red marker. Next to it, someone had written Freedom Day. It was all so clear now. They did not hate Emily. They just needed her to be gone. They needed her to be declared incompetent so they could access the $5 million in her trust fund. That money was the only thing standing between them and the street. Between Derek and a pair of broken legs from a loan shark. They were killing my daughter to pay a gambling debt. I felt sick. I leaned against the desk, fighting the urge to vomit. I looked at the trash can next to the chair. It was overflowing with shredded paper. But right on top, there was something that caught my eye. It was not a bank statement. It was a page from a notebook. A page with handwriting I recognized instantly. It was Emily's handwriting. Loopy and neat, the way she had written since she was a little girl. I reached into the trash can and pulled out the crumpled ball of paper. I smoothed it out on the desk. It was a page torn from her journal. It was dated 3 days ago. I read the words, and my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. I feel so tired today. My hair is coming out in the shower again. I showed Derek, but he just said, "I am stressed." Beatrice made me the special soup for lunch. She stood there and watched me eat every spoonful. She said it has ancient herbs to help my mind. It tastes bitter, but I eat it because I want to be a good wife. I want to get better. But why do my hands hurt so much? Why do I feel like I am burning from the inside? I stared at the paper. The special soup. The bitter taste. Thallium is tasteless, but in high doses it can leave a metallic taste. Beatrice had been feeding it to her right here in this house, watching my daughter eat poison and calling it love. "Frank," I said, my voice trembling. "We have it. We have the motive and we have the method." Frank came over and took a picture of the diary page with his phone. He took pictures of the foreclosure notices and the gambling debts. "This is enough for a warrant, Luke," he said. "This connects the dots. The financial desperation, the timeline, the poisoning. We need to get this to the police immediately." I folded the diary page and put it in my pocket. I was not leaving it here. This was Emily's voice. This was her testimony from the edge of the grave. We turned to leave. We had what we came for. Suddenly, outside the window, we heard the crunch of gravel, tires on the driveway. Frank froze. He moved to the window and peeked through the blinds. A car just pulled up. He whispered, "It is a silver Porsche." Derek. My stomach dropped. Why was he here? He should be at the hospital with his mother keeping up the charade. Unless he came back to destroy something. Unless he knew we might come looking. We heard the front door open downstairs. The alarm did not go off because he had the code. Mom said to clean it out. Derek's voice drifted up the stairs. He was on the phone. He sounded frantic. "Yes, I am doing it now. I am getting the hard drive and the files. If the cops get a warrant, they will find the ledger." "I know. I am hurrying." He was coming up the stairs. He was coming to this room. We were trapped. The back stairs were on the other side of the hallway. If we walked out now, we would run right into him. "Hide!" Frank hissed. There was nowhere to go. The desk was open underneath. The curtains were too sheer. The closet. It was a large walk-in closet filled with Derek's designer suits and shoes. We scrambled inside, closing the door until it was just a crack open. The darkness of the closet swallowed us. I held my breath, pressing my hand against my bruised ribs to keep from gasping. I could hear Derek's footsteps, heavy and hurried, on the hardwood floor. He burst into the office. I could see a sliver of the room through the crack. He looked like a man possessed. His nose was bandaged, his eyes wild. He threw his phone on the couch and ran to the desk. He started sweeping papers into a black duffel bag. He opened the drawer where the ledger had been. He paused. He froze. I watched as he stared at the open drawer. We had left it messy. We had moved the papers. He knew. Derek spun around, scanning the room. His hand went to his waistband. He pulled out a gun. A small black pistol. "Who is there?" He screamed, his voice cracking. "I know someone is in here. Come out." I looked at Frank in the dark. Frank put a finger to his lips and slowly reached for his own weapon inside his jacket. Derek took a step toward the closet. He raised the gun, pointing it directly at the door where we were hiding. I counted the beats of my heart. 1, 2, 3. If he opened that door, it was going to be a bloodbath, and I was unarmed, injured, and trapped in the dark with the man who tried to murder my daughter. The closet door was the only thing separating us from a bullet, but I knew something about Derek Voss that he did not know about himself. He was a coward. A man who pulls a gun on a closed door is a man who is terrified of what is on the other side. He was not a killer. He was a gambler who had gotten in over his head, and now he was trying to bluff his way out of a losing hand. I looked at Frank in the darkness. I signaled him to keep his weapon ready, but to let me handle this. I was not going to shoot my way out. I was going to talk my way out, using the only language Derek understood. Money and fear. I pushed the closet door open. Derek spun around, letting out a high-pitched yelp. He leveled the small black pistol at my chest, his hand shaking so violently the barrel was wavering in circles. "Stay back!" He screamed, his eyes wide and bloodshot. "I will shoot! I swear to God I will shoot!" I stepped out of the closet. I did not raise my hands. I did not look at the gun. I looked him dead in the eye. I walked past the weapon as if it were a toy and walked straight to the desk where the evidence of his ruin was spread out. "Go ahead, Derek," I said, my voice calm and low. "Shoot me. Add murder to the list. You are already going down for fraud, embezzlement, and illegal gambling. What is one more charge on the pile?" Derek blinked, confused by my lack of fear. He lowered the gun slightly. "What are you talking about?" I picked up the foreclosure notice from the bank. I held it up so he could read the bold red letters. "I know everything, Derek," I said. "I know about the $2 million you owe to the Vegas loan sharks. I know the bank is taking this house in 30 days. I know you emptied your joint savings account 3 months ago. You are not grieving for your wife. You are broke. You are desperate. And you are selling Emily's life to pay your bookie." Derek's face went pale. The gun dipped lower. "How did you get that?" "That is private." "Private." I laughed, a harsh, dry sound. "You lost the right to privacy when you started poisoning my daughter. I saw the calendar, Derek. Freedom Day. That is what you call her birthday, right? The day the trust fund opens up. $5 million. Just enough to pay off your debts and keep living in this fake palace with your mother." I took a step toward him. He took a step back, hitting the edge of the sofa. "Does Beatrice know you lost it all?" I asked, pushing the knife in deeper. "Or is this your little secret? Does Mommy know her precious son gambled away the family fortune while she was busy running charity galas?" Derek crumbled. It was pathetic to watch. The arrogance vanished, leaving only a scared little boy. He dropped the gun on the sofa and put his hands over his face. "She knows," he sobbed. "She knows everything. It was her idea." I froze. I looked at Frank, who was standing by the closet door, his phone raised, recording every word. "Say that again, Derek," I commanded. "Whose idea was it?" Derek looked up, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the snot from his broken nose. "My mother. Beatrice. She found out about the debt 6 months ago. The loan sharks threatened to break my legs. They threatened to burn the house down. I was going to confess to Emily. I was going to ask her for help. But Mom said no. She said Emily would leave me. She said Emily would take the trust fund and divorce me, and we would be left with nothing." He was shaking now, his body convulsing with the confession. "Mom said there was another way. She found the old rat poison in the shed. Thallium. She looked it up online. She said if we gave it to her in small doses, it would look like an autoimmune disease or madness. She said we just needed to keep her sick until her birthday. We just needed power of attorney." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I had suspected it, but hearing it confirmed was horrifying. Beatrice was not just an accomplice. She was the architect. And you went along with it. I spat. You watched your wife lose her hair. You watched her scream in pain. And you did nothing. Derek wiped his nose on his sleeve. I was scared. Mom said it was the only way to save the family. She said Emily would not die. She said she would just be confused. Just confused. I wanted to pick up the gun and finish what I started earlier, but I held back. I needed him alive. I needed this recording. Frank stepped forward, phone still recording. "We have it, Luke. Confession to conspiracy and attempted murder. This is over." I looked at Derek with pure disgust. "You are going to jail, Derek. But if you testify against your mother, if you tell the police exactly what you just told us, maybe the judge will show you some mercy. It is over." For a moment, Derek looked relieved. It was the relief of a weak man who finally had permission to stop fighting. He nodded slowly. "Okay. I will tell them. I cannot do this anymore. I cannot sleep. I see her face every time I close my eyes." The room fell silent. We had won. We had the evidence, the motive, and the confession. I reached for the diary page on the desk, preparing to leave. Buzz. A cell phone vibrated on the coffee table. It was Derek's phone. The screen lit up with a text message. Derek looked down at it instinctively. He picked it up. I watched the transformation happen in real time. It was like watching a demon possess a body. He read the message and the tears stopped instantly. His posture straightened. The fear in his eyes evaporated, replaced by a sudden manic gleam. He started to laugh. It was a low chuckle, at first building into a hysterical cackle that made my skin crawl. "What is so funny?" I asked, stepping closer. Derek turned the phone screen toward me. The text message was from Mom. It was short. Judge Reynolds is secured. The hearing is moved to tomorrow morning. We have the emergency custody order. Do not worry, baby boy. We won. Derek looked at me and grinned a smile full of blood and madness. You do not understand how this world works, do you, old man? He sneered. You think the truth matters. You think evidence matters. My mother owns this town. She just bought the judge. He lunged for the landline phone on the desk. I moved to stop him, but he was faster fueled by his sudden confidence. He punched in 3 numbers. 911. He screamed into the receiver, his eyes locked on mine. I need police at the Voss estate immediately. My father-in-law has broken in again. He has a gun. He is holding me hostage. Please hurry. He is going to kill me. He slammed the phone down and looked at me with triumph. They are already on their way, Luke. He laughed. And this time you have a gun in the room. When they find you here with my pistol, they will shoot you on sight. And who will believe a dead man? Frank grabbed my arm. Luke, we have to go, now. We have the recording. We have the diary. If we stay here, we die. I looked at Derek one last time. He was not a son. He was a monster created by a monster. I will see you in court, I said. I grabbed the diary page and ran. We did not go back down the stairs. We could hear sirens approaching in the distance. They were close, too close. The window, I shouted. We ran to the large bay window overlooking the backyard. We were on the 2nd floor. It was a 20-foot drop to the flagstone patio below. Frank looked down and hesitated. Luke, your ribs. You cannot make this jump. I did not have a choice. I grabbed a heavy brass lamp from the table and smashed the window. Glass shattered outward, raining down onto the garden. Go! I yelled at Frank. Frank climbed out, hanging by his fingertips before dropping. He rolled on the grass and looked up. Come on, I climbed onto the windowsill. The wind hit my face. My side was screaming in agony. I could hear the police cars screeching to a halt at the front gate. I could hear heavy boots pounding on the front door. I looked back at the office door. Derek was standing there, smiling, waving goodbye. I jumped. The fall felt like it lasted forever. I hit the ground hard. My bad knee buckled and a bolt of white-hot pain shot through my chest as my broken ribs jarred against each other. I rolled, biting my tongue to keep from screaming. I tasted blood. Frank was there, instantly pulling me up. Move, Luke, move! We scrambled over the garden wall just as the police kicked down the front door of the mansion. We ran through the neighbor's yard, ducking under hedges and jumping fences. We did not stop until we reached Frank's car, parked 3 blocks away. I collapsed into the passenger seat, gasping for air, clutching the crumpled diary page against my chest. Frank started the car and sped away into the morning traffic. We got the confession. Frank said, his breathing heavy. But if the judge is in their pocket, then we have to fight them in the only place they cannot buy. I said, looking at the passing city. We have to fight them in the open. The war for my daughter's life was moving from the shadows to the courtroom, and I was bringing a wrecking ball. Frank drove us to a neighborhood that was a world away from the manicured lawns and iron gates of the Voss estate. This was a place where houses stood shoulder to shoulder, and chain-link fences rusted in the damp morning air. We were looking for Rosa Martinez, the former housekeeper, who had worked for Beatrice for 10 years before being unceremoniously fired 2 weeks ago. Frank had dug up her address while I was recovering in the hospital. She was our last hope. We had the diary, and we had a coerced confession that Derek would undoubtedly retract the moment he got a lawyer, but we needed a witness who could stand before a judge and look Beatrice in the eye. My body was screaming in protest as I climbed out of the car. The jump from the 2nd floor had turned my bad knee into a swollen mess of agony, and my broken ribs felt like jagged knives every time I took a breath. But pain was a luxury I could not afford. I limped up the cracked concrete path to Rosa's small bungalow. Frank stayed a few steps behind me, his hand hovering near his jacket, keeping watch for any police tales. I knocked on the peeling paint of the front door. For a long moment, there was silence. Then I heard the sound of a deadbolt sliding back and a chain rattling. The door opened a few inches, and a dark eye peered out suspiciously. "Rosa," I said, my voice raspy. "It is Luke Harrington, Emily's father." The eye widened in recognition and then immediately filled with fear. She tried to slam the door shut, but I was ready. I jammed my work boot into the gap, gritting my teeth as the impact jarred my injured leg. "Please, Rosa," I begged, pushing against the wood. "I just need to talk to you. They are killing her. Go away, Mr. Harrington." Rosa hissed, her voice trembling. "Beatrice told me if I ever spoke to you, she would make sure I never work in this city again. She knows people at immigration. She said she would have my family deported." I pushed harder, ignoring the pain. "Beatrice is going to prison, Rosa. She cannot hurt you anymore. But I need your help to put her there. Please. For Emily. You raised her more than Beatrice ever did." The mention of Emily made her hesitate. The pressure on the door lessened. I took the opportunity to push it open gently and stepped into the small, dim living room. It smelled of bleach and cooking oil. Religious candles flickered on a small altar in the corner. Rosa stood there in her housecoat, wringing her hands, looking like a woman trapped between her conscience and her survival. "I am not going to court," she said, shaking her head violently. "I cannot go up against the Voss family. They have money. They have power. I am just a maid. They will crush me like an insect." I sat down heavily on her worn floral sofa because my legs would no longer hold me up. I looked at this terrified woman, and I knew that threats would not work. Money would not work. Only the truth would work. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened the photo gallery. I found the picture I had taken in the ambulance right after I pulled Emily from the fire. In the photo, my daughter looked like a ghost. Her skin was gray, her hair was matted and falling out in clumps. Her lips were cracked and blue. It was a hard image to look at. It broke my heart every time I saw it. I held the phone out to Rosa. "Look at her, Rosa," I said softly. Rosa refused to look, turning her head away. "I do not want to see." "Look at her," I commanded, my voice cracking with emotion. "You were there when she moved in. You were there when she got married. You cooked her meals. You ironed her clothes. You know she was healthy. You know she was happy. Look what they did to her in 3 months." Rosa slowly turned her head. Her eyes dropped to the phone screen. She gasped and covered her mouth with her hand. Tears welled up in her eyes and spilled over her cheeks. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Miss Emily, my poor sweet girl." "That is not sickness, Rosa," I said, leaning forward. "That is poison, thallium, rat poison, the kind you use in the basement." Rosa began to sob. She collapsed into the armchair opposite me, burying her face in her hands. "I knew it," she cried. "I knew something was wrong. Beatrice made me prepare the special soup every day for lunch. She brought me the herbs herself in a sealed jar. She said they were Chinese medicine for fertility. But one day I dropped the jar and it broke. The powder inside did not smell like herbs. It had no smell at all. When I tried to clean it up, Beatrice screamed at me. She called me stupid. She fired me on the spot and told me to get out. I waited for her crying to subside. Then I asked the question that mattered. "Will you testify, Rosa? Will you tell the judge about the powder? About how she controlled Emily's diet?" Rosa looked up at me with tear-stained eyes. She shook her head slowly. "It is my word against hers, Mr. Harrington. Beatrice will say I am a disgruntled employee lying for revenge because she fired me. The judge will believe the rich lady in the Chanel suit, not the maid. You need proof. Real proof." I slumped back against the sofa. She was right. Without physical evidence, Rosa's testimony would be shredded by Beatrice's lawyers. We needed something undeniable. Rosa wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her robe. She looked at me, and for the first time the fear in her eyes was replaced by anger. A righteous anger. "She is a devil," Rosa said. "She trusts no one, not even her son. She thinks everyone is stealing from her. That is why she watches everything." I frowned. "What do you mean she watches everything?" Rosa leaned in, lowering her voice as if Beatrice could hear us even here. "The cameras," she whispered. My heart skipped a beat. "What cameras, Rosa?" "I have been in that house 100 times. I never saw any cameras inside." "You are not supposed to see them," Rosa said. "Beatrice had them installed 2 years ago after she lost a diamond earring and blamed the catering staff. She put them everywhere. In the hallways, in the living room, and in the kitchen. In the kitchen." I sat up straighter, ignoring the stabbing pain in my ribs. "Where in the kitchen?" "In the smoke detectors," Rosa said. "They are tiny pinhole cameras. She watches the staff to make sure we are not stealing food or silverware. She watches everything that happens on that island counter." The island counter. That was where the food was prepared. That was where the soup was made. If Beatrice mixed the poison into the soup on that counter, if she handed the bowl to Emily standing in that kitchen, then the cameras saw it. The cameras saw everything. "Does she record it?" I asked, my pulse racing. "Or is it just a live feed?" "It records." Rosa nodded. "I know, because once she showed me a video of me taking a break 5 minutes longer than I should have. She keeps everything. She is obsessed with control. She keeps the recordings on a server." "Where is the server, Rosa? Where does she keep the footage?" Rosa hesitated. She looked at Frank, who was standing by the door, and then back at me. "It is in the wine cellar," she said. "Behind the rack of vintage French reds. There is a false panel in the wall. It opens with a keypad. Behind it is a small room. That is where the safe is, and that is where the computer server sits. It is a closed-loop system. It is not on the internet, so hackers cannot get to it. You have to be there physically to take it." I closed my eyes. The wine cellar. Of course. Beatrice loved her wine almost as much as she loved her money. I looked at Frank. He checked his watch and his face was grim. "Luke," he said, "it is 5 in the afternoon. The court hearing is at 9 tomorrow morning. If we do not have that footage when the judge bangs his gavel, Beatrice wins. She gets custody, she gets the trust fund, and Emily disappears into Serenity Hills forever." I stood up. My knee buckled, but I caught myself on the arm of the sofa. "We have to go back," I said. Frank looked at me like I was crazy. "Go back where?" "To the mansion. Luke, the place is swarming with cops. Derek is there. Beatrice will be back from the hospital soon. It is a fortress. You can barely walk, let alone break into a high-security estate for the second time in 24 hours. I turned to Rosa. "Thank you. You just saved her life." Rosa reached out and grabbed my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Be careful, Mr. Harrington," she said. "The code for the keypad. I saw her type it in once when she was drunk and showing off her collection. It is her birthday." I nodded, committing the information to memory. I walked out of the house into the fading daylight. The sun was setting on the most violent day of my life, but the night was not going to be for sleeping. Frank started the car. "You have a plan, right?" he asked as we pulled away from the curb. "Because right now this sounds like a suicide mission." I looked out the window at the darkening city streets. "I do not have a plan, Frank," I said. "I have a bolt cutter and I have a daughter to save. That is all I need." We drove toward the hardware store. I needed supplies. Tonight, I was not going to be a father. I was going to be a ghost, and I was going to steal the truth from the devil's basement, even if I had to tear the house down to get it. We parked the car a block away from the Voss estate, under the cover of a weeping willow that blocked the streetlights. The mansion was ablaze with lights on the first floor, but the perimeter was dark. The police cars had gone, leaving only a private security patrol car parked near the gate. It was a false sense of security. They thought the threat was over. They thought I was running for my life, not running right back into the lion's den. Frank sat in the driver's seat with a laptop balanced on his knees. The screen cast a blue ghost light on his face. He was typing furiously, his fingers flying across the keys. "I am into the subnet, Luke," he whispered without looking up. "The security system is top tier, but the firewall hasn't been updated in 6 months. Typical rich people. They spend millions on the hardware and zero on maintenance. I can loop the camera feeds for 10 minutes. That is your window. 10 minutes before the system resets and realizes it is looking at a ghost image." I checked my watch. 10 minutes. It was not enough time to make a sandwich, let alone steal a server from a fortified basement. But it was all I had. "I am going in," I said, opening the car door. Frank grabbed my wrist. "Luke, if you get caught this time, there is no bail. No lawyer can save you. They will bury you under the jail." I looked at the mansion. They are already trying to bury my daughter, Frank. I have nothing left to lose. I slipped out into the night. I moved through the shadows of the neighbors' hedges, my work boots silent on the damp grass. My ribs burned with every breath, a constant reminder of the fall I took earlier. I reached the side of the house near the garage. The service door was there, the one Rosa had told us about. Frank's voice crackled in my earpiece. "Cameras are looped. You are invisible. Go." I picked the lock on the service door. My hands were steady now. The adrenaline had replaced the pain. I slipped inside. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I crept past the island counter, the same counter where Beatrice had poisoned my daughter day after day, while the hidden cameras watched. I made my way to the basement door. It was heavy, solid oak. I opened it slowly, praying the hinges were oiled. Silence. I descended into the darkness, the air getting cooler with every step. The basement smell hit me. It was not musty. It smelled of oak and old money. The wine cellar was at the far end of the corridor. It was a climate-controlled vault behind a glass wall. I entered the code Rosa had given me on the keypad. Beep, 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 beep. The glass door clicked open. Inside, it was like a museum of alcohol. Rows and rows of bottles that cost more than my first car. I walked to the back, scanning the racks for the section of French reds Rosa had described. There it was. A wall of dusty bottles from Bordeaux. I felt along the wooden frame, looking for the seam. My fingers brushed a small indentation. I pressed it. The entire rack swung forward silently, revealing a hidden alcove. And there it was. The heart of the beast. A small server rack sat on a metal shelf, humming softly. Beside it was a safe. I did not care about the money or the jewelry in the safe. I wanted the black box with the blinking green lights. The hard drive. The memory of this house. I reached for the cables to disconnect the drive. Click, clack, click, clack. The sound of heels on the basement stairs. My blood froze. Someone was coming down. I looked at the hidden door. If I closed it, I would be trapped inside the alcove with no way out if they opened it. If I left it open, they would see it immediately. I grabbed the hard drive and yanked the cables out. Sparks flew. I shoved the drive into my jacket. The footsteps were closer. They were in the corridor. I pushed the wine rack back into place, but it did not click shut completely. There was a tiny gap. I dove behind a stack of wooden crates filled with Magnum champagne bottles in the corner of the room. The glass door of the wine cellar opened. I held my breath, pressing myself into the shadows. Through the gap between the crates, I saw her. Beatrice. She was wearing a silk evening gown, as if she were dressed for a gala. She held a crystal glass in one hand and her phone in the other. She did not look like a woman whose daughter-in-law was dying. She looked like a woman who had just won the lottery. She walked straight to the French Reds. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought she would hear it. She was standing inches from the hidden panel, inches from where I was hiding. She reached for a bottle of wine. She pulled it out and inspected the label. A smile spread across her face. She put the phone to her ear. "Yes, Dr. Sterling," she said. Her voice was smooth like velvet over gravel. "I know it is late, but we need to discuss the arrangements." She paused, listening. "No," Beatrice said sharply. "No autopsy. Absolutely not. Derek is the next of kin. He will sign the waiver. We want immediate cremation." I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. Cremation. They were not just going to let Emily die. They were going to burn the evidence. Thallium stays in the bone and hair forever. But if there is no body, there is no proof. Beatrice laughed softly. "Do not worry about the police report, Doctor. The suicide narrative is already established. The girl was unstable. A tragedy, really. But we must respect the family's wish for closure. I want her cremated within an hour of the declaration of death. I will pay double the usual fee for the funeral home to expedite the paperwork." She was planning the disposal of my daughter like she was taking out the trash. "Yes," Beatrice continued. "And doctor, make sure the hospital records reflect the organ failure as a result of the overdose. We cannot have any loose ends when the trust fund auditors come looking." She uncorked the bottle with a practiced twist and poured herself a glass. She took a long sip, closing her eyes in pleasure. "To freedom," she whispered to the empty room. She turned to leave, but then she stopped. She frowned. She looked at the wine rack. The one I had pushed closed. It was slightly misaligned, just a fraction of an inch. Beatrice stepped closer. She reached out to touch the rack. Frank's voice exploded in my ear. "Luke, get out. The loop is failing. The system is rebooting in 10 seconds. I had no choice. I could not wait for her to open that rack and see the missing drive. I stood up from behind the crates. Beatrice spun around, gasping and dropping her wine glass. It shattered, sending expensive red wine splashing across the floor like blood. "You!" she hissed. Her eyes went wide with shock. "How did you get in here?" I stepped out of the shadows. I looked like a nightmare. My face was bruised, my clothes were torn, and my eyes were burning with hate. "I told you, Beatrice," I said, stepping over the broken glass. "I am a builder. I know where the cracks are." She opened her mouth to scream, but I did not give her the chance. I shoved past her, knocking her into the wine racks. Bottles crashed down around her, raining glass and liquid. She screamed, then a high piercing shriek that would wake the dead. Derek security. "He is here!" I ran. I ran like I was 20 years old again. I sprinted out of the cellar, down the corridor, and up the stairs. The alarm system suddenly came back to life. Sirens began to wail throughout the house. Lights flashed. I burst into the kitchen. I could hear heavy footsteps running from the living room. The security guards. "Stop right there!" a voice shouted. I did not stop. I shoulder-checked the service door, bursting out into the cold night air. "Run!" Luke Frank screamed in my ear. "Run!" I scrambled over the fence, ignoring the agony in my knee. I could hear dogs barking now. The guards had released the dogs. I sprinted through the neighbor's yard, clutching the hard drive against my chest. I could hear the panting of the dogs behind me. I saw Frank's car idling at the corner, the passenger door open. I threw myself into the car just as a German shepherd snapped at my heels. Frank floored it. The tires smoked and squealed as we peeled away, leaving the Voss estate behind in a chaotic storm of sirens and barking dogs. I slumped in the seat, gasping for air, my chest heaving. I pulled the black box out of my jacket. The green light was still blinking. "We got it," I wheezed. "We got the drive." Frank looked at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes wide. "You are crazy, Luke. You are completely insane." I looked at the hard drive. "I am not insane, Frank. I am a father. And tomorrow morning, Beatrice Voss is going to burn." The courtroom was a theater, and Beatrice Voss was the star of the show. She had not just invited her lawyers, she had invited the world. The gallery was packed shoulder to shoulder with reporters, bloggers, and socialites who had come to watch the fall of the House of Voss, or perhaps to watch the public crucifixion of a crazy old man. Cameras flashed every time someone moved despite the judge's orders. The air smelled of expensive perfume and the distinct metallic scent of blood in the water. I sat at the defendant's table next to Harrison. I wore a suit that Frank had brought me, but beneath the crisp white shirt my chest was wrapped in bandages, and my body felt like it was held together by rusty wire. I looked like a man who had lost. My face was swollen, my walk was a limp, and I kept my head down. To the world, I was the villain, the violent father who had assaulted a grieving family and caused a highway accident. Beatrice had spun the narrative so tight it was choking me. Judge Reynolds sat high on his bench looking down at me with disdain. He was a man with a face like a bulldog and a reputation that could be bought if you knew the right price. I watched him glance at Beatrice and offer a small, almost imperceptible nod. They had already decided the verdict before I even walked through the door. This was not a trial. It was a coronation for Beatrice and a burial for me. The plaintiff calls Dr. Arthur Sterling to the stand. Beatrice's lawyer announced. He was a slick man with a smile that showed too many teeth. Dr. Sterling walked to the witness stand with the confidence of a man who believes his own lies. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. I watched him, and I felt a burning in my gut. This was the man who had tried to sign my daughter's death certificate before she was even dead. "Dr. Sterling, please tell the court about Emily Voss's condition," the lawyer asked. Sterling adjusted his glasses, looking grave. "Mrs. Voss is suffering from severe paranoid schizophrenia complicated by acute opioid addiction. Her self-harm tendencies have escalated rapidly in the last 3 months. The thallium poisoning was self-inflicted. It is a classic cry for help. She ingested rat poison because in her delusional state she believed she needed to purge her body of demons." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Reporters scribbled furiously. "And in your professional opinion, doctor," the lawyer continued, "is Mr. Luke Harrington capable of caring for her?" Sterling looked at me and shook his head with mock sadness. "Absolutely not. Mr. Harrington is a violent man with a history of disregarding medical advice. His actions the night of the incident nearly killed his daughter. He dragged a critical patient out of an ambulance, causing an explosion. He is a danger to her and to society. Emily needs professional, institutional care. She needs Serenity Hills." "Thank you, doctor." Harrison leaned over to me. "Stay calm, Luke. Let them pile it on. The higher they build the tower, the harder it falls." I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. I wanted to stand up and scream. I wanted to tell them about the needle I saw the nurse use. I wanted to tell them about the look in Sterling's eyes when he realized I knew about the poison. But I stayed silent. I was the hunter now, and a hunter does not make a sound until the trap is sprung. Next to the stand came the main event, Beatrice Voss. She walked to the witness box, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. She wore a modest black dress that cost more than my truck. She looked fragile. She looked like a saint who had been pushed to her breaking point. "Mrs. Voss," her lawyer asked, his voice soft and gentle, "tell us about your relationship with your daughter-in-law." Beatrice sniffed and looked out at the audience, her eyes filled with tears. I loved her like my own flesh and blood. She began, her voice trembling perfectly. When she married Derek, I welcomed her with open arms. I knew she had struggles. Her mother passed away when she was young, and I tried to fill that void. I cooked for her. I took her to appointments. I sat by her bed when the voices in her head got too loud. She paused to wipe a tear. And how did her father react to your help? The lawyer asked, pointing a finger at me. Beatrice's face hardened. He was jealous. He could not stand that Emily relied on us. He became obsessive. He started stalking us, breaking into our home. He accused me of poisoning her. Me, the woman who fed her every day. She turned to the judge and threw her hands up in a gesture of helpless despair. Your Honor, I have spent my entire fortune trying to save that girl. We are on the brink of bankruptcy because of the medical bills, and yet this man dares to accuse me of trying to harm her. It breaks my heart. I just want to protect her. I want her to be safe in a facility where she can get the help she needs. Please do not let him take her. He will kill her. The gallery erupted in sympathetic murmurs. I heard someone behind me whisper, "Monster," referring to me. Beatrice looked at me, and for a second, through the tears, I saw the real her. The shark. She smirked. It was the same smirk she had given me through the glass door of her mansion. She thought she had won. She thought the hard drive was still safe in her wine cellar because she believed I had run away empty-handed the night before. She did not know what was in the briefcase sitting at my feet. Judge Reynolds banged his gavel. Order. Order in the court. He looked at me, his expression severe. Mr. Harrington, your counsel may cross-examine the witness, but I warn you I will not tolerate any badgering. This woman has been through enough. Harrison Thorne stood up. He did not button his jacket. He did not pick up a notepad. He walked slowly to the center of the room. He looked at Beatrice, who was still dabbing her eyes. He looked at the judge, who was checking his watch. And then he looked at the packed gallery. Mrs. Voss. Harrison said, his voice booming without a microphone. You stated that you cooked for Emily every day. Is that correct? Yes. Beatrice said, narrowing her eyes. I made sure she ate healthy meals, and you stated that you treated her like your own daughter, that you would never harm her. Beatrice lifted her chin. God as my witness. I would die for that girl. Harrison nodded slowly. He walked back to our table. He reached down and picked up a small black remote control. Your Honor, Harrison said, turning to the judge, the defense has no further questions for the witness. However, we do have a piece of evidence we would like to submit. The judge frowned. Is this new evidence, Mr. Thorne? It was not in the discovery file. It was obtained late last night, Your Honor, Harrison said. It is a video file, a home video, you might say, from the server room of the Voss estate. Beatrice went rigid. Her hand stopped midway to her face. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking like a wax statue. She looked at Derek, who was sitting in the front row. Derek was staring at the floor, shaking. I object. Beatrice's lawyer jumped up. This is ambuscade. We have not seen this video. It could be fabricated. It is authenticated by the timestamps and the metadata, Your Honor, Harrison said calmly. And given the gravity of the accusations against my client, I believe the court deserves to see the truth about Mrs. Voss's cooking. The judge hesitated. He looked at Beatrice's pale face and then at the eager press corps. He knew he could not suppress this without causing a riot. Proceed. The judge grunted. But make it quick. Harrison pointed the remote at the large screen mounted on the wall behind the witness stand. The video playing on the massive courtroom screen was not just evidence, it was a horror movie. The courtroom had fallen into a silence so deep you could hear the hum of the projector fan. On the screen, the digital timestamp ticked forward, showing a date from 3 weeks ago. It was lunchtime in the Voss household. Beatrice was standing at the granite island wearing yellow rubber gloves. In her hand, she held a small rusted tin can, not a spice jar. She used a teaspoon to scoop out a gray powder. She dumped it into the steaming pot of tomato soup. She did not just add it, she stirred it in with a rhythmic motion, humming a cheerful tune that sounded grotesque against the reality of what she was doing. Then she spoke. The microphone on the hidden smoke detector camera picked up every syllable. On the screen, Beatrice leaned over the pot and whispered, "Drink up, you miserable little leech. I hope this one burns your throat. Just die already so we can cash the check. You are taking too long to wither away." The entire courtroom gasped as one, but the video was not done. The kitchen door on the screen swung open and Derek walked in. He dipped a spoon into the pot and tasted the broth. "It is bitter, Mom," he said on the recording. Beatrice laughed on the screen. "She will not notice anything, Derek. Her brain is already mush. Just make sure she finishes the bowl." The screen went black. Harrison turned off the projector. Beatrice stood in the witness box, shaking violently. Her face had drained of all color. "It is a lie," she shrieked. "That is a deepfake. He made it with AI." But nobody was looking at me. The judge stood up, his face red with fury. He pointed at the bailiffs standing by the doors. "Take her into custody." The judge roared, "Now!" The doors to the side of the courtroom burst open. It was not just the bailiffs. It was a tactical team from the Major Crimes Unit. They had been waiting in the hallway. They swarmed the witness stand. Beatrice tried to run. She actually tried to climb over the wooden railing, her high heels scrambling on the polished wood. But 2 officers grabbed her arms. "Get your hands off me!" she screamed, kicking and spitting. "Do you know who I am? I will have your badges. I will sue this entire city." They slammed her against the wall. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut echoed through the room. It was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. They dragged her down the steps of the witness stand. Her hair was wild, her expensive dress was twisted, and she looked exactly like the monster she had tried to hide. Police officers moved to the front row of the gallery. Derek was sitting there, frozen in his seat. He did not try to run. He looked at the officers approaching him, and he just slumped forward, burying his head in his hands. They jerked him to his feet and cuffed him right there in front of the cameras. The arrogant smirk was gone, replaced by the terror of a man who knows his life is over. I stood up. My ribs were screaming and my leg was throbbing, but I felt weightless. I walked out from behind the defendant's table. Harrison tried to stop me, but I gently pushed his hand away. I walked until I was standing right in the aisle, where the officers were dragging Beatrice away. They stopped for a second, blocked by my presence. Beatrice looked up at me. Her eyes were wide with shock and madness. She stopped screaming. She just stared at me, breathing hard. I leaned in close. I wanted her to hear this. I wanted this to be the last thing she remembered before the cell door slammed shut. "Beatrice," I said, my voice low and steady. "You thought you could crush us because you have money and a big house. You thought I was just a dumb old construction worker. But you forgot one thing about builders. We know how to tear things down. You picked the wrong family to mess with. And you definitely picked the wrong father." She spat at me, but I did not flinch. The officers yanked her away, dragging her screaming out the side door. The courtroom was slowly coming back to order, but the energy was electric. The judge sat back down, wiping sweat from his forehead. He looked at me, and for the first time there was respect in his eyes. "Mr. Harrington," the judge said, "I believe I owe you an apology. All charges against you are dismissed with prejudice. You are free to go, but I was not listening to the judge. I was looking at the back of the courtroom. The double doors swung open again. The room fell silent once more, but this was a different kind of silence. It was a silence of reverence. A nurse walked in pushing a wheelchair, and sitting in that chair was Emily. She looked frail. Her skin was still pale, and she wore a scarf to cover her thinning hair. She had an IV drip attached to her arm, but she was sitting up. Her eyes were clear. The fog of the poison was lifting. Harrison had arranged this. He had gotten the doctors to clear her for a brief appearance to give a victim impact statement. She wheeled herself down the center aisle. The reporters parted like the Red Sea. Everyone watched her. The girl who had survived the soup. The girl who had survived the gaslighting. She stopped the wheelchair right in front of the defense table where Derek was still being held by the police before they took him away. Derek looked up at her. He started to cry. It was a pathetic display. "Baby," he sobbed. "Please. You know I love you. She made me do it. I was scared. Please tell them. Tell them we can fix this." Emily looked at him. She did not cry. She did not scream. She looked at him with a cold detachment, like she was looking at a stranger. She raised her hand. It was shaking slightly from the nerve damage, but she pointed a finger directly at his face. "You do not love me, Derek," she said. Her voice was weak, but it carried to every corner of the room. "You watched me die. You watched me scream in pain, and you turned up the volume on the television. You held my hand while your mother poured poison down my throat." Derek shook his head. "No, Emily, please. I am your husband." Emily straightened her back. She gripped the armrests of her wheelchair. "You are not my husband," she said. "A husband protects. A husband cares. You are nothing but an executioner. And you failed." She turned her head away from him. "Take him away," she whispered. The officers hauled Derek out of the room. He was wailing, begging for forgiveness, but Emily did not look back. She looked at me. She smiled. It was a weak smile, but it was real. I rushed over and knelt beside her wheelchair, ignoring the pain in my knees. I wrapped my arms around her, burying my face in her shoulder. She smelled of hospital antiseptic, but underneath that, she smelled like my daughter. She smelled like life. "We did it, Dad," she whispered in my ear. "You came for me." I held her tighter, tears finally spilling down my face, washing away the dirt and the blood and the anger. "I will always come for you," I said. "Always." The judge banged his gavel one last time, dismissing the court, but the real verdict had already been delivered. The truth was out. The monsters were in chains, and the builder and his daughter were still standing amidst the rubble, ready to start over. The gavel hit the wood with a sound that echoed like a gunshot, ending the war. Beatrice Voss and her son Derek were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge called their crimes a betrayal of the most sacred trust between humans. I watched them being led away in orange jumpsuits. Beatrice was no longer the queen of society. She was just an inmate with a number. Derek did not even look at me. He was broken. The Voss mansion was seized by the state. Every painting, every bottle of wine, and every piece of furniture was sold at auction. The proceeds, along with the $5 million from the trust fund that they tried so hard to steal, were awarded to Emily. They wanted to strip her of everything, but in the end, they gave her the keys to the kingdom. But money does not heal nerve damage. The next few months were the hardest of my life. The poison had left Emily weak. Her muscles had atrophied, and the pain in her hands and feet was constant. I moved her back into her childhood bedroom in my small house. I became her nurse. I helped her eat. I helped her walk. I sat up with her at night when the nightmares came and she woke up screaming, thinking she was back in that room with the restraints. There were days when she wanted to give up. The physical therapy was brutal. She had to learn how to hold a fork again without shaking. She had to learn to trust her own body. "You can do this, baby girl," I would tell her, wiping the sweat from her forehead. "We are Harringtons. We are built from steel. We do not break." And she did not break. She bent, but she did not break. 6 months later, I stood on the sidewalk in front of a newly renovated brick building in downtown Chicago. It used to be an old warehouse, but now it had fresh paint and big bright windows. Above the door was a sign, "The Harrington Center for Women." Emily walked up beside me. She was not in a wheelchair. She was standing on her own 2 feet. She looked different. She had cut her hair short into a pixie cut. The long, thinning hair from the sickness was gone, replaced by thick, healthy locks. She looked fierce. She looked like a fighter. "We did it, Dad," she said, linking her arm through mine. "We used the settlement money to build this. It was a shelter and a legal aid center for women trapped in abusive financial relationships. We took the dirty money that Derek and Beatrice had tried to kill for, and we turned it into a weapon to save others." I looked at my daughter. The gray color was gone from her skin. Her eyes were bright. She was not the scared girl who whispered on the phone at 2 in the morning. She was a survivor. "Let's go eat," I said, patting her hand. "I am starving." We went to a small diner around the corner. It was nothing fancy, just booths with red vinyl seats and the smell of frying onions. We ordered steaks and fries. When the food arrived, the waitress put a bottle of steak sauce on the table. Emily picked it up. She paused. For a second, I saw a shadow cross her face. The memory of the soup. The memory of the bitterness. I watched her. I did not say anything. She needed to do this. She looked at the bottle. She looked at me. And then she smiled. She poured the sauce over her steak. She cut a piece and put it in her mouth. She chewed and swallowed. "It is good," she said. It was just a dinner. 2 people eating meat and potatoes in a noisy diner. But to us it was a victory parade. It was a meal without poison. A meal without cameras watching from the ceiling. A meal without lies. It tasted like safety. It tasted like peace. I looked at her across the table, and I realized that I had not just saved her life. I had given her a new one, and she had saved me too. She gave this old builder one last project that really mattered. I put down my fork and looked out the window at the city I had helped build. The world is full of people like Beatrice and Derek. The world is full of wolves in sheep's clothing. They wear masks of kindness. They wear masks of family. They smile while they pour the poison. They think they are untouchable because they have money and status. They think they can crush the weak. But they forget one thing. They forget about the fathers. A father's love does not wear a mask. It does not hide. It stands in the rain. It breaks down doors. It drives through fire. A father's love is not a gentle thing. It is a sledgehammer. And when it swings, it shatters every lie, every scheme, and every wall they try to build around our children. I am Lucas Harrington. I am a builder, and no one hurts my daughter. This story teaches us a profound lesson about instinct and trust. We are often taught to be polite, to respect family hierarchies, and to ignore the little voice in our heads that says something is wrong. Lucas could have listened to the doctors or the police. He could have been intimidated by the wealth and status of the Voss family. But he chose to trust his gut. He realized that true evil often hides behind a smiling face and a locked door. The lesson is simple yet vital. If you feel something is wrong with a loved one, do not wait for permission to act. Do not let social niceties stop you from asking hard questions. Your intuition is your first line of defense. Trust it. Protect your own. Because sometimes you are the only one who sees the truth. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat and made you want to hug your loved ones a little tighter, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because you never know who might need the courage to fight for their family. And tell me in the comments below. Have you ever had a gut feeling that saved you from a bad situation? I want to hear your story. Stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next video.